The younger Aarti was someone who was very conditioned from the people that were around. Being an immigrant kid of Indian parents, and then you're just kind of conditioned to do what you're told. You're not really conditioned to kind of think for your own.
I'm such a big proponent that you have to go through something to see it in other people and to really feel it.
But I think just understanding that the longevity and whatever you do today will affect you. It's never too late. Like, you can still get into repair mode and start to shift things. So
over the course of my life and career, I've discovered the power of consciously investing in mindset and personal development. It has been a true game changer for me in my personal and professional life, and I'm extremely excited that you decided to join us today to take one step forward in your own life. Most of my breakthroughs have come from one-on-one conversations. We created this show to bring you those unfiltered conversations each and every week.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Greg Tomczyk, host of the Connected Mindset Live. I'm extremely excited that you decided to join us this afternoon, this morning, this evening for an insightful conversation. It's going to be another great one. We're going to dive into a lot of topics that we've hit on, but haven't been able to get into the layers of them. If you guys listen to the show, you know I like to dive into the second, third, fourth layer of these types of topics so that we can all act on them. If it's just a concept, we can't put them into action. As most of you know, I'm in the cybersecurity business, so I'm all about being proactive before something bad happens. And this discussion is going to be no different. Technology is just the tool that we all use in our daily lives, but it isn't our entire life. We have to really focus on what's important and health, wellness. We're going to talk a little bit about neuroplasticity, which some of you may have heard in the past. But without further ado, we have Dr. Aarti Soorya with us, and it's going to be just one of those conversations that you definitely need to take your notebook out for and take some great notes. So without further ado, Aarti, it's a pleasure to have you. One of the ways we like to start this show so that the audience can really understand the person in front of us today is by helping us understand the younger Aarti and kind of what brought you to who you are standing in front of us today.
yeah, well, thanks for having me, Greg. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Been loving your work, so I know it's going to be a good one. The younger Aarti was someone who was very conditioned, like most of us, from the people that we're around, right, and our environment. That's kind of what shapes our nervous systems. And so that was something, being an immigrant kid, kid of Indian parents, and then, you're just kind of conditioned to do what you're told, right? You're not really conditioned to kind of think for your own. And I think with, the cultural stuff and then even societal stuff where you go to school, you listen to your teachers, you listen to your elders, there wasn't really room to actually explore what do I actually feel. Like, you're supposed to be a good kid, go to school, do well in school, follow the timeline that society expects you to. So along the journey, I was a pretty good kid, like, no tantrums or anything like that for the most part. But it was kind of what I realized, more suppression of myself rather than actual true expression of myself. So throughout that, you go to college, medical school, residency, you're relying on your elders or your people who have had more experience than you teaching you the way, and that's kind of what shapes how you're going to practice or be in your life. And so along the way, there wasn't still very much room for exploration of other ways of thinking. And when I decided to kind of pursue functional or integrative medicine, even in that training, it was like, still very lab value treat. And that's something that I just was craving more of. What I was hoping to learn was more of a holistic way of approaching medicine. And I joined a clinic hoping that, okay, finally I'm done with the kind of academic portion. I'll get to learn this from my mentor. And I felt like it really fell short. I felt like, wow, we're really not still looking at who the whole person is. And along that journey, for me, I went into fight or flight. And because I stopped sleeping. I was, when you stop sleeping, everything goes off, your mood, your ability to connect with others, the energy, everything, just you name it, it just went off. And in hindsight, now I realize that was, a cry for not being my authentic self. Like I just kind of had assumed, okay, this is how holistic medicine is practiced in this country. And I kind of have to suck it up and do it this way. And then, when I finally left, I decided to leave the clinic because I felt like, wow, I'm not in alignment with this. Therefore, I'm not the right fit for this clinic. And I, then decided somehow, I don't even know, in my awareness, nervous system stuff started to come into my life. And then I started to really research it and understand the adaptations that our nervous system makes in relation to people, environment, circumstances that were really meant to be like adaptive and safe for you. But when they go on for too long, that's when, symptoms start to come about. And so then I was like, oh my gosh, this like blew my mind. I was like, wow, okay, so this is really, really important in healing. And so even like with my own journey, and then when I started to implement it with patients, it was like really starting to see people shift, because these were individuals that had been sick for a long time. That's who I see. And, you can do all the diet and the exercise and the supplements and the medications, but if you don't address how your nervous system or survival brain really interprets the world, you're not going to shift really to that health that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an amazing background. And I'm such a big proponent that you have to go through something to see it in other people and to really feel it. I think, as we navigate the world, once we realize that our nervous system may be broken and go through that hard work to kind of think through how to recognize the symptoms and not just bury them down and just think, oh, that's part of the struggle process I'm supposed to go through to get to this outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that I started to feel other people's nervous systems, which was odd as an athlete. Everybody's kind of, relatively high stress because you're preparing for a very short period of performance. So you're like ramping up to that and you're just getting yourself so jacked up to hopefully perform. And what I realized, later on in my career was that everybody's nervous system was a little bit disrupted. And when a symptom came up, whether it was, oh, my right arm hurts, it was like, let's address the right arm, but it could be your lower
Right.
back. It's so like just getting into that aspect of things and realizing how connected things are, brain and body, and how the nervous system just connects all of that. But
Exactly.
oftentimes we're not able to make it tangible. So I'd love to hear kind of how you define the nervous system to the patients that you have, and you help people kind of feel their way through their own nervous system through the stories that you're able to tell them about your own journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think like it kind of comes back to conditioning, right? Like we're
Mhm.
conditioned to think everything is separate. So even when we learn conventional medicine, it's like your heart is here, your lungs are here, your digestive system is here. But it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, if you think about it that way, because the nervous system, it's the brain body connection and body brain connection. So I think oftentimes people just think, oh, I have to work only here and I have to work only on my thoughts. But what connects the brain to the body is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is 20% from the brain to the body, 80% from the body to the brain. So the sensations, your body is actually not just here, like your senses. Everything is, you're taking in everything from your environment. And so we're wired for safety and survival. right? So we're mammals at heart. So let's say, there's a tiger, and you go into fight or flight, right? That is the chemicals that you need to help run away from the tiger. So your blood pressure is going to go up, your heart rate is going to go up, the blood flow is going to go away from your gut so that you can have blood flow to your extremity so you can run. Meant to be adaptive and safety. Like that's what's going to save you, right? But in our modern day, we have tigers, different tigers, right? We have our finances, we have our relationships, we have work stress, we have kids stress, we have, and not stress is not bad. The thing is, stress can make us stronger, provided that we have the time to recover from it, right? And what I see is that we do not give ourselves that time, and it's not built into our daily life right now because it's so hectic that people are not repairing. And so people, what I've noticed in studying with the nervous system is that it gets simplified into fight or flight and rest and digest. There's actually more nuances to that, where there's actually shutdown. And then there's also like what's called a ventral vagal state, which is you have fight or flight, but it's contained. And this is that stress that can actually make you stronger. So what I see is that people are not really shifting into parasympathetic mode. So I try to connect that, like, whatever symptom they're having. So if they're having insomnia, for example, it's like, okay, you've done your sleep hygiene, you're making sure your blood sugar is stable, you don't have sleep apnea, like rule out the medical stuff. But then at the heart of it is kind of like your survival based instinct is on. Is it safe for you to go to bed if there's a tiger? No, right? So your body is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So I think learning it from that perspective rather than my body is broken, because I always have to say your brain and body did exactly what they're supposed to do. You're not broken. And I think that's one of the things I struggle with, because our system is very like, what's wrong with the labs? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? And I'm like, there's nothing wrong, actually.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Well, one of my good friends and mentors is an anthropologist, and he talks a lot about it's a thick description because a lot of us want to bucket good or bad. And I think our nervous system, it's fluid. So it's not like you're broken or you're fixed, and then it's like everything is good to go. That flight or flight's always going to come back. And if you don't have the right practices, the right outlets to first understand it and have experts like yourself be able to break it down for the common person, then them start to put it into their lives in small ways. It doesn't have to happen all at once, which I think that's what some of the tools in our day to day teach us. Like, you get it all at once, right?
Yeah.
You get the cake, you get the platform, and you're fully immersed in it.
Yeah.
Which doesn't allow us to kind of slowly, creep our way into it and kind of feel our way through it. So that causes us to expect it to be that good kind of or bad description, which is, I think, it sounds like the first thing you help people to kind of clear out of the mindset.
Yeah. And I think it gives them actually relief when they hear, like, when they understand that, oh, my body did what it was supposed to do. It takes the fear away, because I think when you're not feeling well, you're scared, you're going to reach for anything to help make you feel better. But when you kind of can accept it, that in itself can really shift you in a little bit more into parasympathetic mode. And I love what you said about being fluid. Like, we are supposed to go through stress and recover, go through stress, recover. This is kind of the mojo of a healthy, regulated nervous system. But what's happening is we're going here, and then we're going here, we're going here, we're going here. And so you made another good point, is that it's not just like people are like, well, I did my hour meditation and I did this. And so in some ways I'm like, that's great, but you're also then still kind of just managing dysregulation rather than actually truly creating an adaptability, which takes a little bit of time. And I think the first step is actually just building awareness, right? Like, we're so disconnected from how we feel because we're so stimulated. So understanding that, the other point that I make with people is that your psychology, your neurology, your immunology, and your endocrinology, meaning your hormones, it's all one system. It's not immune system's here, your emotions are over here, your this is over here. Everything is connected, which makes sense because then your body knows where to put the energy to. So I think one thing that we've become very reductionistic, even in the holistic world, is lab value treat. Lab value treat. What nutrient deficiency do you have? What micronutrient deficiency? We go down these kind of pathways, which I'm not saying it's not helpful, but it's usually rarely the root cause from what I see. And so just understanding first awareness. Where do you even feel it? Do you feel anything? Because if you don't feel anything, that tells me, okay, maybe you're in a more shut down state of your nervous system, and we have to actually build more inputs physiologically into your body so that you can start to sense more. Because what happens is with chronic stress or chronic illness, these pathways have been disrupted. The connection between the brain and body, because of adaptations, have been disrupted. So we need to bring that back in. So depending on what state of your nervous system you're mostly in, the practice will change, or what you're going to do is going to change. That's why meditation really isn't for everyone. At that point, it's a good tool, but blanket statements like that, I would say, are not helpful for the nervous system.
Yeah, I was listening to a expert. His name's Dr. K. I don't have his full name, but I heard him out in the world, and he said there's like 130 something forms of meditation, and everybody just thinks about like one or two.
I just heard about him. Yeah, the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he helps people work through addictions, but a lot of the addiction is nervous system because they're trying to numb one of those systems that they think is separate.
Right.
The dopamine system, or the things that are common language for I'm in pain here, so here's an easy way to address it because I don't really understand how it connects to the other, and kind of taking ownership of the tigers that you're choosing and taking ownership of the situations you put yourself in. And I think that's such a big leap for people to start taking ownership of, when you choose pain. Obviously we can't choose every pain. We're not going to be able to control everything in life, but building, like choosing some pain, choosing some fun, choosing some movement, choosing to not choose the tiger right before you go to bed, like things of that nature, where you're intentionally doing things in a way that helps you kind of start to experiment with how your own body's set up. And I think because it's been overcomplicated for a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people listening in are thinking, it's complicated. So, people run away from complications most of the time because it's not the easy path. And they're probably saying, I now understand it in a little bit better way to start taking small actions. And I know you and Sheethal, who referenced you over to the show, so definitely appreciate her connecting us, talked about salsa dancing and like waking up and getting the body moving. As a former athlete, I'm so key on, and I think it's so critical just to move your body because it gets things into that fluid motion of the, kind of the up and down, as opposed to like, you're sleeping, and then you shoot up to, start work, and then you're crashing down by lunch, and then it's just the waves are not happening how they should. And I think that rhythm, do you consider that the circadian rhythm? Is that a kind of separate
Yes,
analogy?
it's different rhythm, but absolutely. Like circadian rhythm is huge. I think that's another thing that is disrupting our nervous systems because we've kind of artificially extended daylight, and our systems are not used to that. And that prevents proper repair of the body and the brain, right? So people sometimes think, oh, well, I get 8 hours of sleep, or 8 hours is a myth, but I get my sleep, and but one day it's 12 to 8, the other days it's like 9 to whatever. And the thing is that rhythm actually needs to be the same, mostly, as much as you can without stressing yourself out, because the organs in your body are entrained by light, and that's what tells what time each organ can repair. And if you keep shifting that, like jet lag, you're not going to repair properly. And so that can lead to inflammation. Again, it affects how your brain and body repair. So you're going to probably still not feel optimal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Is there a way for folks listening in to evaluate kind of where they are? I think, we're kind of over assessed to some extent because everybody wants to do the next online assessment or things of that nature. And that can create some confusion of what to do next. But do you recommend a way folks can, start to evaluate it now that they're conscious of how important it is? I'm sure they're thinking, what should I do next? And where should I start? Obviously, awareness is key, but any other tips and tricks would be very beneficial for them.
I think that's a really good question because you're right. Assessments are over. There's so many. And so I think I'm very let's keep it simple because simple is good for the nervous system. So I think it's just first understanding, the state that you're mostly in. So if you're kind of above this kind of flow, do you feel angry? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel do you have sleep issues, insomnia, digestive issues, immune system issues? Just first understanding, are you so ramped up, I can't calm down? Or are you I'm shut down, I'm flat, I'm numb, I'm depressed, I'm so fatigued? Just kind of understanding, am I here or am I here mostly? You can be in both states. That does happen. But I think just first visually, just understanding what state am I mostly in, because then that can give a signal to, am I more fight or flight or am I more shut down? Then depending on where you are, the practice or whatever you're going to do to start to, one, just build awareness. Where do I feel it in my body? And then understanding there's different neurosensory exercises you can do depending on what state you're in to help start to reconnect this system. And that, it's a leap for people to understand that when you connect the brain to the body or the body to the brain, that in itself will help start to regulate your hormones, your immune system, your mood, but it's slow, right? It's not sexy. So, sometimes what you're up against is, everyone's always like, what supplement can I take? What natural supplement can I take? And it's those are tools. Medication is a tool. Absolutely use it. But this is really, if you really want this connection to be strong and your health to be strong, just building that awareness and start to understand what your body needs. And it's going to take trial and error, be ooh, this happened, when I did this, maybe it's not for me, or this is for me. And that in itself is building your brain body connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious from your training and kind of how you look at the world today, where it is a mindset, in my opinion. Obviously it's an industry, but where it started for people to attach, here is a easy outlet, whether that's a prescription or a pill, and there's places for that, and there's illnesses that really need that. And but in other countries, traveling the world and seeing different cultures, they're still very into that natural way of doing things, go take your magnesium. It's kind of the more natural path. But I know with capitalism and things of that nature, that's helped to increase it. But do they teach you in your training or in school, this is when that transition took place from a historical standpoint, and this was the reason why we started to produce more chemical type pills instead of using, plants or things that are in our environment that have been helping for thousands of years?
It's a really good question. Before it was really because when the antibiotic came out, that was life-saving. And it was most of the stuff that people were struggling with were infectious diseases. And so, the chemicals came out, very helpful. But then what happened is that, industrialization, we started to shift away from like more rhythmic nature living and more agricultural and more processed stuff. Then we shifted to that, and now you started to see the development of lifestyle related issues. But then we still use the same model of drug fix for, from an infectious disease standpoint, but now we're using drug fix for a lifestyle issue, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So it was like that mindset was still there, like, oh, let me fix it with a drug. But the thing is, what people don't realize is that, your physiology is like this. Maybe it's causing high blood pressure and you take a drug, it's just suppressing it. But still over time, it's going to come up until you actually reconnect the brain to the body. And so that's why you see people just needing higher doses of blood pressure meds or higher doses of blood sugar medications and all that, because you still haven't addressed the root cause.
Yeah. How often do you see kind of the spiraling effect of once somebody starts that process? Like there's probably a lot of good that takes place, but other things may pop up. It's kind of like the ibuprofen thing. We used to take a lot of ibuprofen and Tylenol with baseball because it was like you want to get rid of the inflammation so that you're not sore the next day. And then they're like, but it may, make your liver. It may literally destroy your stomach, your liver, and your pancreas at the same time. And it's like, well, what's the immediate priority? And for us as young players, we were like, we want to feel better tomorrow so we can perform for the fans around us. Like, and that was our top priority. But I see a lot of people get out, and it's like a slow spiral while you're kind of taking it. But once they get out and stop taking it, it's like then they start realizing they have an ulcer. Their liver, enzymes aren't producing like they're supposed to. And it's like, wow, I wish somebody would have told me.
Yeah, just always think like every drug, there's going to be some reaction in the body it's going to, disrupt. So your body's always working towards homeostasis, meaning the balance, right? So I think understanding that it can do it, you just have to give it the conditions to be able to do that. And so that's why I'm really big on, repair, like making sure you're building that into your day, because that is what's going to help your longevity and not be reliant on, medications down the line. They're tools, but like you said, like you didn't have, like, as athletes, right? Also the mindset of an athlete, like you performance based, and you're going to do what it's going to do. You do what it takes to, be able to perform at the level that professional athletes, like the level is really high. But I think just understanding that, the longevity and whatever you do today will affect you, but you can still, it's never too late. Like you can still get into repair mode and start to shift things. So
yeah, that's what I try to tell, fellow players and people that are going through that spiral. Like it's not too late. You're still like, late 20s, early 30s, maybe later, maybe you're going into your 40s, but you get into that mindset of it's too late. Like I'm already broken. Like it's that good or bad, right? I'm already broken. Maybe I'll just, continue to live the way I've been living because it's not going to be fixed, right? Or it might be fixed a little bit, but it won't be worth it because I'm on a downward spiral. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's like that you can break that. You can totally, the good or bad, if you don't subscribe to that, that's great, because then you can really start to, that's the first step to shifting.
Yeah, I see that a lot with diet as well. Like when we get addicted to these, foods that are mass produced or whatever it is, it's very hard to get out of it because that initial like 3 to 6 to 9 months is so hard because your body's like, you've been training me for this. And it's like, you've been conditioning and priming your body to be in that level of the balance. Like it was, balanced at some points, but you throw it off with what you eat. I'm curious, in your practice and what you talk about in the community, how important is the balance between eating, exercise, or movement, and that kind of rest and recuperate stage? And do you, and you can't recommend an exact percentage, but do you help people kind of start to structure the way that they live? And obviously everybody's a little bit different, but that they should focus on those aspects, because what we focus on is what we do, and then that makes us. So if they're just doing it nonchalant and just saying like, I think they have to kind of figure it out on their own. But is there a recommendation that you see people generally really help them from a balanced kind of percentage standpoint across those three critical areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's fun. By the time people get to me, they've already done, the diet, the exercise, or sometimes they can't even do exercise because they're that shut down. So I think I see a skewed population, but I do agree that trying to eat mostly whole foods and not obsessing about it, because I think oftentimes people come to me and they're actually very rigid in their diet. And so I have to kind of break that and be like, it's okay to have some ice cream once in a while, like only because that rigidity is actually a fight or flight response. It's a control response. So for me, I'm trying to loosen that up. And sometimes having a doctor just tell you, loosen up, it's okay, that, can shift their system down a little bit because they're too afraid to give themselves that permission. And so diet, like eating mostly whole foods, making sure your blood sugar is stable, that's huge for nervous system regulation, because if your blood sugar is unstable, you're going up and down. And so then that's causing a cortisol response. Every time your blood sugar goes low, cortisol comes up, then you're going to feel anxious, and then you're going to go like this. So really honing on making sure your blood sugar is stable throughout the day. And that in itself can help make you feel less anxious, help with sleep. In terms of movement, that's a more individualized, but oftentimes, with the women that I see, I have to pull them back from trying to do like the HIIT workouts and stuff, like all this, stuff that they're kind of seeing on Instagram or whatever that they need to be doing. But I'm like, you're spiking your cortisol every time. And if you're not recovering, then it's just causing imbalance in your other hormones. So kind of tailoring where they're at, even, and it can sound so much like patronizing at first, just to be like, if they're in shutdown, like if you can't work out, just bring in sensation. Like you're lying in bed, just bring in some proprioception into your body so that it's starting to reconnect that. Just literally moving your toes up and down. If you're so fatigued you can't do anything, just that much. And that's it. That's all you do. And you just keep showing up every day, and then slowly you'll start to, move. I think people don't realize that it can be that little to shift. But it's just staying committed to that. What was it? Diet, exercise. What was the other one?
Diet, exercise, and then the rest and recover.
Rest and recover. Yes. Yeah. I think we battle a lot of stimulation. And I think our brain and body was not designed for the level of stimulation that we have. Of course, down the line, it will change because I think technology is not going anywhere. It's a great tool. It's connected, we get to have great conversations because of it, and be able to teach because of it. But I think we're overstimulated in our culture. And so that in itself isn't helping us shift into repair mode. The brain and the body really like decompression time. And this is like, people like where you don't have inputs coming in, because think of that as a kind of fight or flight state 24/7. And so we don't connect that's happening. We were designed to be outside in nature, have, quiet time, listen to the birds. All of that is actually signals to help lower your cortisol. But if we're constantly stimulated with, social media or news 24/7, news 24/7, please, like, don't be like, that's one thing I would tell people to shift, have controlled times that you see something. That way you're controlling the inputs a little bit of what you're taking in, because we have a war going on in Israel, and you cannot be in that 24/7 and still expect your body to heal. Your brain doesn't know the difference between what's on TV versus what's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So being mindful of what are you taking in.
And I feel like it's so new. Like we think about it as something that's been around forever, but
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, it's almost like we're still at the point where we're trying to figure it out on what to put in front of us. And until you feel it, it's very hard to contextualize. I almost think about the rest and recover as like sitting around a fire like people used to do,
Yeah.
hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, and share stories to get themselves out of the fight or flight. Like they weren't hunting, they weren't, preparing things, they weren't, making sure that the fort was secure and, protected, and the kids were doing well. And, that's kind of the activity aspect and the exercise. But we don't get enough of that. Sit around the fire, share stories, which, listen to the birds. Maybe people aren't talking, so it's kind of just like we're enjoying the time together. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people don't get that enough because the phone's usually sitting in front of us with our
Yeah.
friends, and we're talking about, hey, did you see this thing on social media? And here's the new strategy that I'm putting in place because it's the latest kind of the jolly come lately type strategy. And that is so hectic for the nervous system. And I even find myself in it, I'm sure we all do, where it's like
Oh,
we
it's a
want to
battle.
improve. It really is. We're at constant battle. And recently, probably the past 3 to 6 months, as I've gotten very interested in the nervous system and started to put practices in place that I'm trying to feel through if they work for me or not. You get in that spiral of, let me just try the latest thing that's out there. And that's like constant change, which we're obviously supposed to battle change. But if it's like every day you're trying a new
Yeah.
modality or new practice, that's very stressful for the body.
Exactly. That's a
Mhm.
really good point. Like, like kind of to piggyback off of like before it was like the supplements and all of that. Like, what's the new like supplement blend that I need to take? And then now, with even the nervous system stuff, that's being sensationalized. Like, do this somatic workout and you'll release your stress. And in a way, I'm like, that's still kind of like disconnection, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, to your prior point, like which is amazing, like when we used to sit around the fire or whatever, like in community, that in itself is what we, kind of engages the ventral vagal system of the nervous system, which is calming and kind of helps get you into more repair mode. It brings safety. We are wired kind of to be in tribes, and a lot of us are living very isolated now, and we don't have that community. And therefore, subconsciously, if we don't feel safe, you're not going to repair, right? You're always going to be kind of on high alert. And if you're on high alert, that's more fight or flight. You don't repair in fight or flight. So build even simple, like I say simple, but like making sure who's in your environment you feel safe with, you feel connected to, because that in itself will help get you into, repair mode.
Mhm. Yeah, and it can be pretty toxic because we're in kind of a validation world, and sometimes the people that validate us aren't best for our environment because it's that balance aspect. And I think you've hit on it very precisely. And I think what I love about the work that you do is you go back to the basics,
Yeah.
which, I wish I always had a doctor like that. Like I tried to ask, PhDs that we had around us for baseball, like, you took my blood, you watch me every day move, you feed me the food that I eat, what else can I be doing to feel better? And a lot of times, it's sad, and I know a lot of people are getting this response, is like, lower your sugar intake and stop eating carbs, or like, it's like, and it's not even about weight. It's like, I want to
Yeah.
feel good every day and be consistently feeling good. What practice can I put in place? And I think a lot of those things are the basics that you're hitting on, which oftentimes people don't get that response because the doctor is, they want to be cutting edge and they want to be on the verge of things. And sometimes that's not what the patient wants to hear. Is, maybe you just need to lay down and, like, tense up your body and then release it and breathe. It's like, it sounds so
Right,
simple, but
right,
it's so
right.
impactful.
Yeah, and like what I love about that is that you get to harness your body's own physiology and pharmacology. And so we make all of these neurotransmitters and all of the stuff that impacts our state. And I think, it's because our lives, I think, have become so busy that we do want the quick fix. But like you said, it's really in the basics,
Mm-hmm.
which
For the
isn't
folks that are, go ahead.
sexy to people, but
It's so important, and it may sound in your world that there are people around you that are doing the same thing, but it's so rare, because even as I've started to see more of like a local holistic medicine doctor who is the first one in a big metropolitan area, like it's
yeah,
not commonplace, and I didn't really get that through baseball, but I always kind of sought it out to ask people, what are you thinking about? How can I, improve and get better, but not follow the latest thing that has the 3-year side effect that nobody knows about yet. And just kind of getting back to the basics is just so important. And I'm curious, what you recommend for people who are getting that response of, stop eating sugars and lower your carbs. It's like, that's so like point system. It's like your levels are good, your cholesterol is a little bit raised, and just do these 2 things and it'll repair your whole life. And it's not very integrative. So
yeah. How I like to see it is, your lab work, so your biology, is always going to reflect what the nervous system is sensing. If you're doing, diet and exercise, all of that is right. So if, like, what I see happen is, like, people will go like, oh, my blood sugar is still high, even though I'm eliminated carbs and all of this stuff. And they're kind of chasing that. But it's like that blood sugar really could be a reflection of a high cortisol state, because your system is still under, stress. And so cholesterol also will increase in a high cortisol state as well. So looking at it more from a holistic point of view, that don't just look at your labs like, oh, cholesterol is high, blood sugar is low, high, and I need to do more restriction in my diet, or I need to change something more in my diet. Because I found that the more rigid people got with their diet, they were missing the big picture, that it was actually a reflection of something bigger happening in their life. Whether it be like a divorce, or a stressful work situation, or something happening with the kids. There's always something usually deeper, is what I found.
yeah,
And looking at it from that lens. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, the root cause aspect, which you mentioned it earlier. We're trying to solve symptoms, and I've had phases like that where I know I was stressed and I know my body was telling me things, but until I got the doctor to say like, hey, you have an overgrowth of yeast in your stomach, like what's going on in your
Yes.
life, and until he's able to ask me that question, I'm like, yeah, I've been going through the most stressful time of my life, but I didn't know that's how it was impacting my body. And that's when it really, things start to connect in your mind from a mindset standpoint of like, oh, well, maybe if I get rid of this one stressor, that will help alleviate one
Yeah.
of these symptoms that are part of the root cause, which is this stress. So
Right.
kind of, it's almost like reverse engineering, as we talk about in the technology world, and thinking about it
Right.
that way, as opposed to thinking about it like you have to engineer your life in a way. It's kind of that balance, sometimes solving a problem.
Totally. And I think for most of us, like, for a while, it might be you need to take something off your plate while you become more resilient, and then you'll be able to handle more. So the goal is not really to avoid stress, but temporarily, sometimes you do need to take stuff off of your plate so that you can shift, and then, connect, do what you need to do and understand yourself. That's where I think, like, your physiology, when you're true to yourself authentically, that's when it's going to hum, right? So honest, like, when you have a symptom, if you can start to see, where am I off with myself or in my environment, who am I with, who am I not with, work, whatever, then you can kind of, it sets you up for a better life, I feel like, if you're listening and you're tuned in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious how you define physiology, because we're going through a phase now, which is, it's a hot button issue, but it's talked about so much of the mental health crisis and the psychological crisis that we're going through. And you mentioned earlier that 20% of the brain to the body, and then it's that 80% from the body to the brain. and how important your physiology is to really help to solve, or at least lower the likelihood of the mental health crisis that we're going through, and it's only going to continue to increase as technology gets more and more, because it's addictive, and I think it takes us away from our physiology. So I'm curious kind of how you define physiology to the common person who may still not really understand what psychology is and how they use it in their daily lives.
Yeah. So how I kind of look at physiology is like all the hormones and the neurotransmitters, how they're communicating and everything. And that is a reflection of what your system senses. So when we talk about mental health, it's like, okay, fight or flight, like reflection of fight or flight can be feeling anxious, like high anxiety, maybe even like manic, right? And then severely depressed is going to be more of a shutdown state of the nervous system. So your physiology in a high fight or flight state, you're going to have high cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, like all the chemicals that are going to make you feel ramped up, right? On a low physiology state, you're going to have kind of lower neurotransmitter levels where you've kind of been through that stressor for a long time, and then your body shuts you down to conserve energy. So all of like your neurotransmitters, hormones, all of that is going to be more depleted, more kind of a depleted state. So it's all going to be a reflection of that. So when in the mental health world, and therapy is great, but it's very cognitive, right? And in a way, if 20% of the brain body connection is from the brain to the body and 80% is from the body to the brain, oftentimes to bring in more regulation into the system, using the body as a method to help regulate that autonomic nervous system is kind of more of an effective way. And then doing mindset or therapy work can then take off, because what happens is if someone is going through a struggle, they're shut down and all of that, and they're talking about this still, you're kind of re-ingraining those pathways still, right? It's like, okay, I talked about it, I feel better, but my physiology hasn't shifted yet. And so let's take someone who's depressed. First, you might actually need to actually just bring in, like I said, like more proprioceptive input into the body, more movement, gentle movement, so that the body knows it's safe. And then once you start to bring in more regulation into the nervous system, then going and doing talk therapy can be very, very helpful. But, sometimes we'll see people, they're like, I've been in therapy for 20 years, I haven't gotten anywhere. It's because the nervous system still hasn't been addressed.
Yeah, that's very important for people to understand. It's just thought of as, like you said earlier, the systems are all separate things that obviously work together. I the therapist that I have, that I've been seeing for a year or so now, he's big on me exercising before I go in, because I love the back and forth, because I'm a very cerebral person, but
Yes,
I've
same.
trained my body as an athlete, and
Yeah.
it's amazing. If I have a busier morning and then I can't get exercise in right before I go see him, he can tell and feel based off of the questions I'm asking, or like how I'm responding. And when I exercise before, it's just a completely different dynamic. And I'm
Yes.
glad that he encourages that more movement than thinking. It's kind of like you're going to be thinking when you're moving,
Yes.
but kind of getting your body. He calls it like clearing the body, but for me, it's like I run my thoughts out, I guess you could say. And
Yeah.
he's so big on that. But I know, therapists I've seen in the past, through baseball, they would give us like sports psychologists. They would just come in and say, this is just a talking head. This is just a brain that I'm trying to help fuse pathways, and they'll figure out the physical stuff on the field or in the weight room. And it's also connected that I think we need to intentionally move the body, and then
Yeah.
use the brain to connect back to it.
The point that you made, we don't actually know where the mind is. You cannot localize the mind, right? So there are receptors in the body for your emotions that we think only happen here, but in your body are the same receptors for the neuropeptides that they're, I think now even finding that they're made in the body too. So this is why movement, like it shifts how you feel, right? And I think one thing is also moving throughout the day, because we are, a lot of us at desk jobs, and yeah, we work out in the morning, but then there's no movement the rest of the day. I find, I mean, by 3 o'clock, I'm like, I need to move, because like I feel so off right now, because I haven't, when you're sitting and seeing patients, I have to move throughout it so that I can keep my energy up. Because otherwise I'm like, then I feel more depleted, and then I don't do anything, and it's a bad cycle. So yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, movement, and you feel it, right, with someone. And I think like the more awareness everyone individually can build, then the more actually compassion you can build for someone else. Because if you understand your nervous system, you can kind of start to tell where someone else is at too. And then understand it's like, okay, this is probably where they're at, and then you can kind of approach it in a different way rather than being reactive.
Yeah, that happens so much and it may be the medical field as well, but in the business world, because we're hopping from thing to thing, and if you don't feel other people's nervous system, you're trying to meet them where your nervous system is. And most of the time, if you just saw a tiger and you come into a meeting and the person's very calm, all of a sudden their world is just thrown for a spin. And it's like, are we? And that's why I think a lot of people today are like, we need to have less meetings, because if they know people are stressed and people are just continuing to stress other people out who are coming in meetings with them, it's like, well, let's just stop having these, and people can do their own work and be on chat bots and chat functions. And
Right.
I don't think that fixes the problem. I think the root cause is having people more aware of their nervous system, so that before they come in, maybe they go for a 10-minute walk because they bake that into their schedule, and they take a few deep breaths, make sure they're hydrated, and then they come into it. And that's where I think magic happens from a brain body connection. Or they're all standing up and maybe they do some jumping jacks before a meeting. I'm big on that, where it's just like, everybody like
Yes.
get up for a second. Let's rotate chairs and
Right.
take it
Yeah,
out.
because otherwise, like, sitting for long periods of time, it's rough. And I feel for the kids, because the way they're schooled these days, it's like, oh, like they're made to sit in chairs for so long, and but they should be moving and being outside in nature, and then that's affecting how their brain development is happening. And so it's kind of like a feed forward cycle until, like, parents are more regulated and they know what the kids need, so then they can adjust what they can do outside of school. So then, they develop kids that are more regulated. So it's not just like this feed forward cycle that we're having with dysregulated nervous systems.
Yeah, definitely starts there. It's foundational.
Hmm.
I see that in the European Union, as kids walk to school. Their parents aren't watching them walk to school. They walk home for lunch, and then they walk
Yeah.
home. Maybe their parents pick them up, and but I think that's a safety thing. It's a trust in your community, and I think a lot of people have, they feel at threat because of the things going on in our world, where
And
people are shooting up schools, and there's a lot of
understandable.
negativity, and it
Right.
makes them take the kid from their bed to the house, to feed them. Then they're in a car, then they walk
Yeah.
outside for like 5 seconds, and then they're in a building all day, and maybe they get
Yeah.
some PE, and then they do it all. It's kind of that reverse coming back, and it's no one's fault, but I think it's got to take intentionality from the individual standpoint. Obviously, you don't want to put your kids at threat or in danger. Like,
No.
I have kids, so
Yeah.
I know that, but trying to intentionally put them in a community that maybe is close enough that they can walk and get that exercise before they come home for lunch. That doesn't happen traditionally in the United States, but it's almost encouraged in the European region, because it seems like they know the value of getting these kids exercise, because when they come into the classroom, like I mentioned with the therapy aspect, they're much more
Yeah.
focused and engaged, and they're more receptive to hard problem solving,
Yeah.
which is what I think we're all doing in daily life, and we can't do it if I look at it like we're almost clogged. So
Yeah. Yes. That's a great way to put it. And like, your kids are always going to be a reflection also of what the parents' nervous systems are. So like we're all connected, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so sometimes like, parents will be like, my kid is like this. Okay, let's look at you.
Yeah.
Because it begins with them. Because if you regulate the parents, then the kids will also feel, safe, right? Like they're a reflection of something that's off. And they're pure, right? Like they're really like they're the ones that really have it together. Like their reactions are proper. They haven't learned the adaptations yet. So
We all need to bring the kid out more in us, I think, and it's
yes,
like
actually, that was
the
the point
dog
I was
thing.
gonna
Yeah.
That's what I was going to make. Actually, thank you for bringing that up. Adults need play because play is a ventral vagal state, and this is what helps bring safety again to the system. So and it has to be kind of non-structured, right? So if you see a kid listening to music, sometimes they're dancing kind of like funky, but they don't care, right? That's what we need also, is like just letting loose, because like even structured workouts sometimes can be kind of feeling rigid to the body. So if you can move the body, it's flowy, it's just all of that. It's not only good for, your joints and everything, but what happens is that the fascia also gets movement in different planes. If you only do workouts in one plane, that constricts the fascia. Fascia also then, is innervated by the sympathetic nervous system. So you're still giving a feed forward cycle through the body to the brain that it's constricted in fight or flight. We constrict in fight or flight, right? So if we can open up more, that also from a body perspective can give the autonomic nervous system, okay, things are okay. And so that's another way to kind of release stress. So, we talked a little bit about ancient cultures. It's like, that's why you look at like African tribes and stuff, when they would dance, it was just like free flow with the music in community. And it was like daily stuff that they would just release the stress from the day. You don't have to talk about it. Just, get it out of your system.
And it's amazing how that made them resilient, even though to them it was just a part of life. But when they hit the rough spot or the crisis, or a season that was bad where there was lack of food, it helped them to flow through it, which I think is it's just so important. And I think that's a big piece of what's been lost for a lot of people. And I hope people walk away from this with a way to find their flow. And it's not the same for everybody, but you have to get in the rhythm of the environment around you, even if that's walking outside and feeling the sun. And it's like, hey, the sun's hot, so if my body feels hot, I need to loosen it up. They're just different ways. And that's why I think the latest and greatest, the jolly come lately type mentality really hurts a lot of people. And I think what one of the themes that I heard is go back to the basics while you're healing, and then find a way to immerse yourself slowly back into not necessarily reality, but the person in you that's not good or bad, but really continuing to move forward and improve in the way that you want to go. And I think we all want to improve at the end of the day. Like, we're all very growth oriented individuals, but we get stopped by walls and obstacles that sometimes we can't see. So we need experts like yourself to say, there's a wall right there. Like, here's a door to your right. You just need to walk through that door and stop banging into that wall. You keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, understanding that you're a reflection of, how you were brought up, and that's what's shaped your nervous system, and things have been adaptive. So like oftentimes when I hear patient stories, I'm like, well, no wonder. Like, I mean, I don't say anything yet because sometimes they're not there yet to hear it, but it's a reflection of all of that.
Yeah, it is. Aarti, it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing. It may seem like there's a lot of people that are doing your type of work. And I say that in the cybersecurity space because we're in the community and sharing ideas. It feels like everybody knows it and does it, but it's one of those areas of life that everybody needs, but they probably still aren't getting access to it. So I look forward to people reaching out to you. How do you recommend folks kind of reaching out? Maybe they have a question after the show or want to learn more about how to engage you and the practice you're in.
Yeah. So first, thank you for having me on. I love having these conversations and the work that you're doing because you're spreading really good information that needs to be talked about. I am at Dr.A Soorya on Instagram. On Facebook, I'm Aarti Soorya, MD. And then my practice is groverhealth.com.
Excellent. Can folks utilize your services if they are out of the area? Do you guys do virtual health or anything of that nature, or do they have to be local?
Usually what I have them do is like at least come in for a physical exam, and then the rest we can do virtually.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. But I think hopefully down the line there'll be other options. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put your Instagram. I know a lot of people have Instagram, and I've followed your work on there, and it's incredible what you post with partners that you have and things of that nature on sleep and really just strategies for people to put in place. And going back to the basics, which I think was so refreshing when I initially dove into your work, that if we overcomplicate things, it really stresses us out instead of improves us. So definitely recommend everybody goes back to the basics. Aarti, one of the questions we like to conclude the show with, because we could go on all day with this topic, and you have a great mind to be able to just help people break through a lot of the clouds that they're trying to navigate today, is what does connection mean to you today and kind of where you're headed going forward?
That's a good question. Connection to me now, like individually, is being authentic to myself and really understanding what is in my body, what do I feel is nourishing for me versus depleting. That can be food, that can be people, that can be circumstances, environments. So I'm more particular about that now.
Mhm.
And then connection to me in relation to others is like, again, who do I feel safe around and comfortable and can be, completely myself. Before it was like you would be friends with everyone, the college mentality, like all of that.
Mhm.
But now I'm just much more particular about who is in my uh, immediate environment and who's nourishing. So
Yeah,
where do I feel good?
I love that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a critical point. And thanks so much for joining us, and definitely looking forward to continuing the conversation, having you on in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having me.